Great to see you all. I know that some of you are on Zoom, some of you are on the live stream. For those of you who are on the live stream or on Zoom, we have some packets with many of the what we're going to be working today, which is a lot of things from the liturgy of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So if you don't have a copy, I believe in the Zoom they might be able to put a link so you can actually download it. But if not, if you go to the website under this program, there should be a way to download the PDF for this packet of songs. So let me start by saying, if you think that you're going to come tonight, and learn all the liturgy for all the holidays, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that won't happen. Okay, we're going to try to cover, like in an hour plus, something that will be hours and hours and hours that will happen during the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But it's a little bit of a taste. The idea is not necessarily that you will be learning new melodies, but for those of you who been coming for many years, just to be a bit of a little bit of like lighting the match one more time to remember some of these melodies. And for those of you who these melodies are new, just a little of an opportunity for you to say, hey, I want to learn this. All of the services, by the way, of the previous years, for the last many years, are actually in the YouTube channel. They're all in a calendar order, so if you keep rolling back through the holidays of last year or the holidays of the previous years, you would find them there, so you can see if you want to practice one particular thing, because we might not even sing a whole piece tonight as a one thing. So if something feels like, you're welcome to take the packet with you. So if you think, oh, page 2, I want to learn it and I want to sing more, you can also go to the recording, and I'll try to guide you as to where, in which services these things happen. For the most part, I would say I created a program in a way that is similar to the order of the actual services, and I will tell you when something is a bit out of order. And there are obviously some things that will belong to many sections, but let's start with something sweet. This is sorry, and I should start also by saying, during the holidays, and today is not an exception, you can see this packet, we're not going to cover the whole thing. There are 24 pages, so there are a lot of words. Okay, if your Hebrew is good, go for it. If your Hebrew is not that good, let me just lower the volume a little bit. So if you sing la la la, it's perfectly fine. Again, and some of these, like we're going to start with page 2 with a Achot Ketana, which is this, from a liturgy point of view, what we sing at services throughout the year is a combination of different sections of different influences that we have. Okay, one of the main influences probably in the liturgy is actually the book of Psalms. So when we sing Hallelujah, 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 but even there are some little lines here and there that are definitely part of a big part of inspiration, in particular in the morning service. But then there are a lot of piyutim. When we sing Lecha Dodi, when we sing Adon Olam, those are piyutim. This piyut, Achot Ketana, is a piyut that traditionally is sung in the context of the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. So we actually been starting the service of Rosh Hashanah in the evening with Achot Ketana, and then we'll have a different piyut, Lecha Elit Shukati, which will be the opening for the evening of Yom Kippur. And again, these are piyutim that definitely Lecha Eli, we only do it the evening of Kol Nidre. Throughout the year, we don't really sing it. And Achot Ketana, we sing it a tiny bit more, like sometimes we sing it in Slichot. But it is also very unique to this moment. And you're going to see the melody is very simple, and it's just a metric thing the line before the indented lines, you see some indented lines, the line before the indented line, the metric of it is different than the other ones. But the melody itself is pretty simple. Let's sing as a melody. So that's pretty much the whole melody. Okay, so actually, those of you in the third row, welcome. But I'll invite you to come here and be closer, be in the first row here, if you don't mind. So let's keep the third row if we really have a lot of people, and there are packets with the songs in the first row. If you want there, Susan. With the words. Achot ketana tefiloteha orcha ve'ora tehiloteha elna refana lemachaloteha Shana v'kileloteha beno amirim lecha tikrave v'shir v'hilulim ki lecha na'eh ad matai talim enecha v'tire zarim ochlim nachaloteha tichle shana v'kileloteha. Let's do the last two verses. Matai tale bitecha mi bor mi beit kere ula tishbor vetaflifere letzetecha כגיגור להתם וחלה מחלותיה תכלה שנה וקללותיה חזקו וגילו כי שוד גמר לצור הוכילו בריתו שמר לכם ותעלו לציון ואמר סולו סולו מסילותיה תחל שנה וברכותיה. So now, again, it's a way to welcome the new year. So welcome to all those old faces and new faces. It's great to see you all. And I hope that by now, those of you who are on the Zoom or on the live stream were able to find the packet and you're able to follow. So we're going to continue on page 3. again, we've been doing these meetings for many years, and I want to repeat many of the things. So those of you who've been with me for those other meetings, I apologize for the repetition, but there's a concept of a leitmotiv, the same way that, let's say, when we think about Peter and the wolf, and there's a leitmotiv that represents each one of the characters, okay? The same way here in the liturgy, we have certain musical motifs that may represent Shabbat, that might actually represent Mincha of Shabbat, or might represent weekdays. On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, as the Hakim, they share the same liturgy, but you're going to see that there's going to be a leitmotiv for the evening service, which will be different than the leitmotiv for the morning service, and then it's going to be different than Musaf, and it's going to be different than, let's say, the service of Neilah. I'll show you a good example in a little bit, but when we did that leitmotiv, which we sing also in the Aleinu, it is actually part of the central leitmotiv of the melodies of the evening service. So when we sing, so the Baruch Hu will be Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Then I will continue, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. So if you see that identity, that's similar in quality. No, it's not exactly the same melody, but it's similar to. So the service, unless it falls on Shabbat, the service on the evening on both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, actually on Yom Kippur we start with Kol Nidre, but the actual service for the evening starts with Baruch Hu. And then the next thing will be the two blessings before the Shema. So the melodies of this Hatimot, this ending, this seal that actually happen at the end of each one of his paragraphs, and you will see this little square or the little arrow that marks where normally we started singing this, what is called in Hebrew Hatima. I'll just give you an example that is there for Ufros Aleinu, which is after the Shema. Ufros Aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha Baruch Ata Adonai, and the response will be Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo HaPoreh Sukkot Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim ve'al kol yoshvei Tevel. Amen. And you will see that repeating throughout the evening service. I mentioned before about piyutim, when we sang Achot Ketana. There are other piyutim, like when we sing Kianu Amecha, Kianu Amecha ve'ata Eloheinu. Some of the piyutim have many melodies that were written by different maybe Hasidic groups or by modern artists or by very old traditions. Maybe some are Sephardic melodies, like Achot Ketana, the melody that we did is not an Ashkenazi melody. One of the melodies that we started including a few years ago is this melody for Kianu Amecha, that is actually a Chabad melody. And the melody goes. Let's do it here. So if you're familiar with that melody will actually, we will use it eventually for some of the Kianu Amecha. Sometimes we'll actually sing Kianu Amecha with the melody that we all know from a long time ago, that I said before, Kianu Amecha. But we also will sing Kianu Amecha to this melody that I just did. But we'll also use this melody for some other things as well. So one of the things that we'll do it is for Tiku B'Chodesh Shofar. So the liturgy, before going into the Amida, there's a Chatzi Kaddish. I'm talking about the evening service. And before the Chatzi Kaddish, normally on Shabbat we'll sing Veshamru. Okay. On holidays we'll sing other texts. On Rosh Hashanah we'll sing we'll sing Tiku B'Chodesh Shofar, and then eventually on Yom Kippur we'll sing even a different text, Kiva Yom Hazeh. But in this case, I'll just do it for Tiku B'Chodesh Shofar, and it's this melody we just did. Tiku B'Chodesh Shofar, Ba'kesel Yom Chagenu, Ki Chok לישראל הוא משפט לאלוהי יעקב תיקו בחודש שופר בכסל יום חגנו כי חוק לישראל הוא משפט לאלוהי יעקב ירלן לי רי 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 ירלן לי רי 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 ירלן רי 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 ירלן רי ירלן רי 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 ירלן רי 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 the third part ay 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 la la ay 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 la 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 ay 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 la 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 ay 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 la 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 ay la la ay la la ay la 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 ay So it's a beautiful melody. It's a very simple melody, although there are actually a couple of parts to this melody. It's a nigun that is relatively simple, and hopefully those of you who don't know it, if you come to all the days of the Hagim, by the end of the Hagim, I will promise you know the melodies. You may not be able to apply to all the texts that we'll sing it to, but for sure you'll be familiar with the melody. As I said before, Tiku precedes Chatzi Kaddish, which we normally, when we sing Yitkadal ve'yitkadash Shemer Haba, that's the melody that we normally use on Shabbat. For the evening service, it will be Yitkadal ve'yitkadash Shemer Haba be'alma divra kirute וימליך מלכותה בחייכון וביומכון. So this melody has a bit of that flavor. Eventually when we get to יש מרבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, which is rai 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 rai. So it has that bit of a quality of that leitmotif that I mentioned before. Now let me recap a little bit and say there's some things that will actually be part of every service, pretty much. So one of the things that is central to all of the services is the Amida, okay, which sometimes is silent, sometimes we sing the beginning and then we continue silently, which is the way that we do it, which is called Echa Kadisha, where we start together through, let's say, the Kedusha, and then we'll continue silently. In the case of the evenings, all the evenings, the Amidot are always in silence, but there's always there's an Amida. Okay, the text of the Amida will always start the same way, and it will end the same way, but in the middle, there are definitely variations of text depending if it's weekday, if it's Shabbat, if it's a holiday, if it's Rosh Hashanah, if it's Yom Kippur, so the text will vary a little bit, definitely the silent part. The same way that there's an Amida in every single service, the same is true for Kaddish. Every service will have Kaddish in one form or another. Chatzi Kaddish, which is the shorter version of the Kaddish, is normally used to divide sections within a service. So in this case, we did the beginning of the evening service, and now we're going to be moving later on into the Amida. So the section of the Shema is divided from the next section with the Chatzi Kaddish. And that's the melody we will do. In the morning, we'll do something similar to divide two sections in the service of Shacharit, which is the earlier part of the morning service. And then we'll also do a Chatzi Kaddish later on in the Torah service, and we'll do another Chatzi Kaddish during Musaf. And then in Yom Kippur, we'll also do Kaddish at different points. And all of these different Kaddish, not all of them, but plenty of them will have different melodies, depending on which service they are part. It's exactly the same text, but it happens to have different melodies. So in that case, will be It Gadal, Vit Kadash. That's the melody for the evening service. Now, if you go for the morning service, stay in the same page because it's the same text. יתגדל ויתקדש שם רבה בעלמא דברה קירותה וימליך מלכותה בחייכון וביום אחד ובחיי כל בית ישראל. So if you're familiar with that melody, that's the melody of the morning service. So again, we have one melody already for the evening, another melody for the first part of the morning, and then in the service of Musaf, which is the later part of the morning service, we'll sing even a different melody. And if you want lyrics, there's some booklets here. If someone wants to just pick up, there's some books here, some text here if you want to. So this melody goes, Yitgadal, Yitgadal, V'yitkadash, V'yitkadash, Shem Rabba, Amen. Ve'alma dibra kiruteh, Ve'yamlich malchuteh, So again, you can see already these three melodies are really different, and they each one identify a section of a service. One is the morning service has this melody that is much more mellow, is like not so pompous as the one in Musaf, okay? And so I should have started by saying we're embarked in this month, almost 2 months, okay, of the month of Elul, and then eventually plenty of weeks within the month of Tishrei that eventually will finish with Simchat Torah. But right now we're in this place where we in the morning we are this section of Slichot every morning. We are sounding the shofar every morning. We're getting ready, okay, for this spiritual work that eventually will have this pretty high point within Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And music, in a way, is supposed to somehow help us, guide us through all that. So again, going back to the idea of the leitmotif or Piyutim on the Wall for any opera, there's a subtext of how the melody is actually guiding you through, how it guides you through the different musicals or operas to convey something that, in a way, is also in whatever they're singing. They're not going to be singing something, you kill me, although actually sometimes we actually sing some things that are not supposed to be so happy, and we sing it in a very happy way. That's for a different conversation, but that's a detail there. But I'm going to just for the sake of showing you another Hatzi Kaddish in the service of Ne'ilah, and this is a melody that will be used only for the melody of for the service of Ne'ilah. This is going to be similar to a melody that will be used for the Amida itself. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל. And it's a very repetitive melody, but still it's a particular melody that will be used only for the service of Ne'ilah. So if you're here for Ne'ilah or in SPSA, we'll use that melody. But it's only used throughout the whole year, only at that moment. So that's just to give you a sense of the richness of the liturgy that we actually have. And again, many of these melodies have developed over decades and decades and centuries in many cases. I don't think there are that many melodies that go back centuries and centuries and centuries, but some of these melodies were somehow compiled. Definitely, these particular melodies are definitely plenty old, but it doesn't go to what is called Misinai, which is where we refer to some melodies that are really old, and then you would say, oh, those come from Sinai. They're heavenly, okay, that could be true. Anyway, similarly, again, if you turn to page 4, you'll find the Kiddush. The Kiddush, which we do on Friday nights, we do on the holidays, or we do also on Rosh Hashanah, the text will vary a little bit between the different Hagim, but also the melody will change. So on Shabbat, the way that we sing it at BJ is a bit more grand in Rosh Hashanah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen Baruch atah Adonai. And later on, when we get to Sukkot, you're going to hear a similar melody, but not exactly the same. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. So again, you hear the melody and you know we're in the Shalosh Regalim, which are Sukkot and eventually Pesach and then Shavuot, or we are in Baruch atah Adonai, we're in Rosh Hashanah, or we are. It's almost like if you experience all these melodies, then you almost like the identity comes with the melody also. Anyway, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, and eventually we'll sing to a melody that many of you already know, which is the Sheheyanu, is an Israeli melody, much more contemporary. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Sheheyanu v'kimanu v'higianu. So, you know it. Let's move on into page 5. Actually, let me see if I didn't write any. Okay, so on before actually we do page 5, I just want to point out, going back to the idea of the leitmotiv, there's going to be a melody that will be the leitmotiv for the service of Shacharit. that liturgy will also be in other places of in the service of Musaf. There's a little bit of that as well, but for the most part, it's actually part of the leitmotif that will come in this Hatimot, in this ending of these different paragraphs, with that melody. So now we move into, let's go into page 5, because I just wanted to point that because that's actually an earlier part of the service than what you find here on page 5. So on page 5, we spoke before about Amida being central to every single service, and I said before that every Amida starts the same way. So that's true for the first few lines where you see there the first paragraph on page 5. Then there are going to be some additional sections that are only done on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then you will see the third paragraph is actually something that is done only on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and all the days in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then eventually the Amida eventually continue with a text that for the most part is similar to what happens during the year, throughout the year. And this melody will be used for both the service in the morning, both for Shacharit and also for Musaf. Obviously, as I said before, in the evening we don't sing out loud the Amida, so there's obviously no melody for that. And then, as I said before, for Neilah there will be a different melody, which will be similar to what I said before. Oh, Baruch Atah Adonai, oh, Eloheinu, Avoteinu, Vimoteinu. But this melody will be used actually for both Shacharit, Musaf, and also for Mincha on Yom Kippur. I would say one of the differences between the Hagim in general, at least for the experience that we have here at BJ, is that there's more of a participation that everybody's singing together pretty much throughout the whole service on Shabbat. In the Hagim, there's a bit of more of like a traditional idea that is someone who is what is called the Shaliach Tzibur, which is the emissary of the community, who will be leading the community in prayer. So it could be me, it will be Deborah, and then we'll have a number of lay people who will also help leading some of the services. But this first part is, for the most part, something that will be done by the Shaliach Tzibur. For those of you who are familiar with the term, we call it Shatz, Shaliach Tzibur, which is the Shin and the Tzadi. So the Shatz, the Hazan, the Hazanit, will sing that first part, and eventually we'll continue with the second paragraph, the second paragraph that you see there. מסוד חכמים ונבונים ומלמד דעת מבינים אבטחה פי בתפילה ובתחנונים לחלות ולחנן פני מלך מלכי המלאכים ואדוני Adonim. And then the third paragraph is when everybody comes in. Zochreinu lechaim, melech hafetz b'chaim. Zochreinu lechaim, melech hafetz b'chaim. Bechotveinu, bechotveinu, בספר החיים למענך, למענך אלוהים חיים. And then Chazan or Chazanit or Shatz will continue. Melech Ozer ufoked Moshiach umagen Baruch atah Adonai Baruch Baruch Shemo Magen Avraham ufoked Sarah. Page 6. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים, אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל. And everybody will sing, מכלכל חיים, בחסד, מחיה מתים, ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים, ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. And then the shots will continue. מי כמוך בעל גבורתו מידו מלך. I'm pointing out in particular the Amida. The reason being is that the Amida happens to be done, and in particular this section is done. It's going to be done 7 times throughout the holidays with this melody. So you might not, if those of you who are not familiar with it, you may not get it the first time, maybe not the second time, but hopefully by the third, you're going to start getting more familiar, and then by the time you come for Yom Kippur, you're going to feel even more familiar with. The other thing I want to point out is that in general, the sections that are sung by the Shaliach Tzibur don't really have a clear metric, and it's not so easy to follow if you want to sing with me or with Deborah, with whoever is leading, because it has more of a quality of what in opera is called a recitative. That someone is almost like speaking the words, happens to have a melody, but doesn't really have any kind of rhythm or anything like that. In general, the sections that the community is singing has more of a clear melody. So we sing, Zochreinu lechaim, o mechalkel chaim. So even if the leader starts singing something different, there's going to be a clear tempo that will be imposed by the musicians that you're going to hear a very clear way to participate. Anyway, let me move on into something that will only be happening in the morning, in the Shacharit section, which is in the repetition of the Amida. We'll start with that, with what I just sang before, and eventually we'll move into a couple of piyutim. We were singing before. Same melody. We'll use it for this piyut that you have on page 7. And we will sing it as a nigun and eventually start on the 4th line. The first 3 lines are not sung, but basically the second part of that page we'll sing. And the Atahu Eloheinu will be the tail end of part of the nigun, and eventually we'll start with Bashamayim Uvaretz. We'll start the more square part of the song. Atahu Eloheinu Bashamayim, Bashamayim Uvaretz, Gibor v'naratz, Dagul mervava Usachvayehi, Vetziva v'nivra Uzichro lanetzach Chai Olamim Tehor Einayim Yiralarai Rai Yiralarai Rai 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 Ayralalai Yiralai Rai 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 Yararai Rai Rai Yai Rai 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 Ayrai Rai 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 Yoshev Seter Kitro Yeshua. So again, this piyut is also relatively square, and the melody is very square, so it's relatively simple to put the text to the melody. Again, if you don't read Hebrew well, you might find that the text is moving too fast. Just go for la la la. And if you are able to only work and prepare just the first 4 lines, then do that. Next year you can learn the next 4 lines. Let's continue with another piyut that will also be done as right after the first part of the Amida. This is a melody that Rabbi Shlomo Karlebach wrote for Shomer Israel, which is part of Tachanun. And we do it for certain things during the year, so you might be already familiar with the melody. And again, here we don't sing, actually we do sing from the top. ובכן לך הכל יכתירו לעורך דין לבוחן, we're on page 8, לבוחן לבבות ביום דין לגולה עמוקות בדין לדובר מישרים ביום דין להוגה דעות בדין לוותיק ועושה חסד ביום דין לזוכר בריתו בדין לחומל מעשיו ביום דין לטהר חוסיו בדין ליודע מחשבות ביום דין לכובש כעסו בדין. And then we continue with that melody. Similarly to what I did before with the Chabad melody, that we do a melody that was written for something else. Again, we are not the only ones who will do that. The same way when we do this Karlebach melody for this piyut, there are many synagogues that would probably not even do that melody, or might do that same melody for something else. And the same is true again when we sing Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Obviously that was not written for the Hallelujah that we sing. It was written for a different Hallelujah. But there are many people, we sing it sometimes to Yedit Nefesh, sometimes we sing it to Lechadodi. And if you go to other shuls, they might actually only sing it to Lechadodi and not to the other melodies. So there's a bit of like borrowing that different communities take from pop music or even from traditional Jewish composers, and they use it for different sections. So those are good examples for that. Let me move into page 9. I'm not planning to do the whole thing, but just to give you a sense of, this is part of it's called the Uvechen, so it's still part of the repetition of the Amida. And there are going to be a series of paragraphs that we'll sing, and many people will sing with us. This is probably one of the most complex sections because it doesn't have that metric that that meter, that rhythm that I was referring before, and it has a bit of like almost like a tribal quality the way that we sing it. So we sing. תן פחדך אדוני אלוהינו על כל מעשיך ואימתך על כל מה שבראת ויראוך כל המעשים וישתחוו לפניך כל הברואים ויעשו כולם אגודה אחת לעשות רצונך בלבב שלם כמו שידענו אדוני אלוהינו שהשלטון לפניך עוז בידך וגבורה בימינך ושמך נורא על כל מה שבראת ובכן תן כבוד אדוני לעמך. So this is probably one of the trickiest texts to try. It's a tricky text to pronounce all the words in particular because we do sing it relatively fast. So definitely do not feel overwhelmed on this one. Definitely go at your own pace. And if you're able to participate at different points, I will definitely encourage you to do that. Yes? Yeah, sure.
Some of the prayers like this one,
It's a good question. We used to sing it all together, all the time, and then as we have more Shlichei Tzibur, that in order because let's say, even from the time of Marshall, Marcelo, Rolly, and me, and Felicia, by this point, she also has, because we go so fast, the phrasing has to be pretty precise in order to be in sync all the time. So sometimes we play safe and we say, okay, maybe one will sing the first one, second will sing. So it's not necessarily that you're not invited to sing. You're invited to sing, but it's just a cleaner quality to sing. Otherwise, definitely for people to follow, will become even harder to follow and to try to sing together. Although I personally don't mind chaos. Okay, like if you go to a traditional shul, by the way, chaos is extremely common. Like you will not. I would say chances that people are singing something together is pretty rare. So that cacophony of like people singing, I would say that most people, I think, are attempting to sing the same melody, but from when do they start, when do they finish, how they phrase it, each one is on their own. So yeah, so in that sense we are a bit different, because, in particular because we use microphones. So it's clearly easier for someone to take a lead, and even in the sections that are not so rhythmic, but just have that image that if you end up singing slightly off, it's fine too. Chaos is okay. Yeah. I invite you to do chaos. That's fine.
Yeah, but then,
Sorry.
sometimes Rolly might mention that a certain prayer is call and response. So that's like, okay, for this one we are expecting this. Not that
I'll tell you. I'll give you some examples when it is call and response. So let's say the easiest example, which you might be familiar, is Ashrei. So Ashrei is a clear call and response. Later on, we're going to sing some things, and it's going to be less of a clear cut as to where it's call and response. So I can tell you if those are call and response. Sorry, you had. Sorry. That's a good question. Good question. Again, first of all, traditionally, actually, the arco is not necessarily open the whole time. Yeah. Again, part of in general, the tradition of like opening the ark gives also like a bit of like it raises that particular moment. So let's say if you open the ark for Unetane Tokef, Unetane Tokef is an extremely central part of the repetition of the Amida. Okay. Now, maybe when we do this piyutim, maybe we'll not open the, or maybe yes. There are certain sections that you want to elevate certain parts of a service by actually by opening the ark. There's also a reality that we, at BJ, we don't do a full repetition of the Amida. We do a full reading of the Amida in silence in the morning, and both in Shacharit and actually in all of the service we do a full reading in silence. But then when we do the repetition, we skip some sections. So in that context, and again, it's also like there's a tradition that if the ark is open, you have to stand. So in particular on Yom Kippur, it gives an opportunity that you do not open the ark, then allows people to be seated. So again, how that is navigated within the more liberal communities, and which is different than how much more observant communities will follow, is definitely different. And if you go to an Orthodox shul, you'll be standing much longer. So those of you who have been in those services, but that's a detail there. So I just mentioned, actually, before we go. So let's go to page 10. So Jenny, in answer to your question, this is going to be a good example to which one is the response. So we sing B'Sefer Chaim. We sing B'Sefer Chaim twice. Again, it's not really in the liturgy calling for that, but it's intended to be, like the way that we do it is the intention that the Sheliach Tzibur, the Chazan, will actually sing the first time, and then eventually the community will respond, and then the Shaliach Tzibur, in particular in Shacharit, will end with the blessing that you have separated from the first 5 lines. So when we sing B'Sefer Chaim B'Racha V'Shalom, the truth is that if I'm singing B'Sefer Chaim and I started B'Se, by Se, there's already 100 people singing with me already. So some people got the point that they were supposed to be just done by the Shaliach Tzibur and some people don't. It's not a big deal. So if you want to sing both, you are welcome to do that. But again, there's no need to repeat something like this. So just, this is a good example of that. But let's do it once. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה נזכר וניכתב לפניך אנחנו בכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים ולשלום בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה נזכר וניכתב לפניך אנחנו בכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים ולשלום. And then the Chazan will continue Baruch atah Adonai עושה השלום Amen. I want to point out 2 things. One is this is probably, I think, is by now is only the only melody that survived all the melodies that I composed that is that we still use in the liturgy. But just to say, this is a contemporary melody. I wrote it maybe I don't even know by now. Feels not as contemporary because maybe it was close to 30 years ago, but it's not a. But still, again, for all of us who are here, if I tell you that something is from the 60s or the 70s, you will say that it's contemporary, correct?
It's really beautiful.
Okay, thank you. So the other thing I want to point out is that depending on who is the Shaliach Tzibur, the keys might not necessarily be the keys that you will feel comfortable singing. So go an octave lower whenever you feel like it's too high. It's not a big deal. That's probably how you do it on Shabbat as well. Some of the things are written in such a way that, in particular, certain things that are have a very wide range. At some point might actually, for some of you, might actually go beyond your range. You can go lower and then catch up again. If you're musically inclined, you can do harmonies. If you feel comfortable enough doing harmonies in public and things like that, you can do that as well. Yes. Kind of. So in general we do them. So it's a pretty longer conversation. Normally, female voices will feel more comfortable singing lower, okay, and male voices will actually feel comfortable singing higher. Not always, but obviously, if you find a soprano, will have actually no problem whatsoever singing high. And the same way, there are plenty of men who might not feel comfortable singing that high. Our tendency, and in particular for the liturgy of any section, there's a like if I were to sing, let's say let's do Avinu Malkeinu. So if I do Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu v'anenu. So that part is comfortable for most people. Now, now we're getting to still not that high. I think everybody could sing the next part. Now, if I sing the whole thing much higher, when I do there's an energy that you can have when you sing higher. Obviously, as long as you can reach those notes with comfort, then you have a different energy. So sometimes in response to you, sometimes we choose higher keys in order to try to bring that a bit of like more energy. So it's not necessarily to make other people not sing, but in general, what I feel like what happens, in particular, again, I happen to have, you're gonna laugh at this, but I happen to have a pretty low voice. Okay, I'm a bass. Some people might think that I'm a bass baritone, but my range from, when I was working and training for opera, my range was bass. I could not sing a baritone sections. So in general, the section what is high for me is definitely high for you as well, but I cannot sing like where some tenors can sing. And we don't really have that many, we don't really have tenors singing at BJ, so that which makes it helps for the keys for that we sing. We don't really have sopranos either. But if you were to go to a shul where the Hazan is a tenor, you might actually find yourself comfortable singing because you're literally singing, you feel comfortable singing the whole thing an octave lower. I cannot sing as high to give you that comfort, but that's sometimes what happens in many shuls. So Avinu Malkeinu, you know it. Okay, let's do it once. Just Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu v'anenu, ki en banu ma'asim, aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, ve'hoshienu. And then we'll repeat it, key-wise, depending on who's leading, the key might actually vary for something like this, for sure. So if you have me, I'm sorry, but you will be singing a bit higher. If it's going to be some other Hazanim, they might be singing lower. So anyway, I'm going to skip the Adonai Adonai because I hope that we'll do it later on. The Shema that you find at the bottom of page 10 is the same melody that is the melody that we've traditionally done for the high holidays, but we've been also doing it during Shalosh Regalim. So we do it for Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, for Simchat Torah, we do it for Pesach, we do it for Shavuot. And it's a melody that is, again, it's very pompous. The only thing I will point out is that in the second line, in Echad Eloheinu, there's one word that is added compared to that when it's not on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we do not add the word Venorah, okay? But all the other text is the same, just a different melody. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. So this is a great example where it's clearly a call and response. I think this one is much more obvious to everyone that this is Shema, that is signed by whoever is leading, and then the response is the same text, and then the same melody to the next line. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Venorah Shemo. And then the response, Echad Eloheinu. And then eventually we go to Gadlul Adonai Iti, and then Echad Adonai Hagedula, and eventually Torah is walking around. So we're now in the Torah service. Let's move into page 11, which you have Unitan Tokef. Unitan Tokef is, as we were doing this piyutim before, that are part of the repetition of the Amida in Shacharit. Unitan Tokef is part of the repetition of the Amida only in Musaf. So you will hear Unitan Tokef 3 times this year, actually every year. We do it in both mornings of Rosh Hashanah and then in the morning of Yom Kippur. And it's a liturgy that is probably one of the most dramatic and more theatrical. It is also pretty problematic as to like the idea that kind of like who will die, who will die by fire. It's a pretty dramatic section, but do we really believe all that's actually the theology that guides us as Jews? Unitane Tokef has, I feel like still is an extremely powerful section, even if you have problems with the theology of the Unitane Tokef. I'm not going to sing the whole thing. Unitane Tokef, the same way that the Amida on its own is almost like there's some songs that could be an aria in opera, and the Amida is more than an aria. It becomes almost like an act. Unitane Tokef is also an act on its own, and it has ups, downs, it has rhythms, it has all these variations of melody. So it's, from a melodic point of view, it's one of the most complex sections of the service. So, and for the most part, it's actually done by the person leading. But just for you to remember is. ובכן ולכת לקדושה כי אתה אלוהינו מלך ונתן את תוקף קדושת היום כי הוא נורא ואיום כי הוא נורא ואיום. And then we continue silently and eventually ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות, and eventually we continue for the whole rest of that paragraph. The section that the community will sing is actually what you see in the second, the bottom of actually the last two sections of that page, the community will sing. So it's בראש השנה ייכתבון וביום צום כיפור ייחתמון בראש השנה ייכתבון וביום צום כיפור ייחתמון. And that will be repeated several times within each one of the Unitane Tokef. Actually, there's another section that people will sing in the paragraph before, just right above that. So 5 lines from the bottom of that longer paragraph on that page 11. And to your point, it's sung twice. So I will sing it, the Hazan will sing it once. Kevakarat roedro ma'avir tzono מעביר צונו תחת שבטו. And the committee will sing כבקרת רועדרו מעביר צונו תחת שבטו. So that you got it. And then after the בראש השנה ייכתבון, we eventually go to the bottom part of the page, which is a very short section. Uteshuva, utefila, utsedaka, mavirin edroha hagezer. If you're going to sing that song, that note. You can sing that melody as well. And then eventually the Unitane Tokef continues for a little bit long. Yes, go ahead. You can do that. You have the hair. I don't. I used to, but I don't. Okay, I need it. So, and eventually on page 12, you'll see the continuation, but again. Ada, ada. On the third line, some people might actually join. כחציר יבש וכציץ נובל כצל עובר וכענן קלה וכרוח נושבת וכאבק פורח. And then Chazan will continue silently. Continue alone. כחלום יעוף. Actually, many people sing the end as well. ואתה הוא מלך אל חי וקיים. Yeah, so the end of Nitane Tokef, many people actually sing once we start in that rhythmic part that we all sing together. The second paragraph that you see there on page 12 is something that we started doing either last year or 2 years ago, maybe last year. It's a contemporary melody that many people have recorded. One of the people that probably made it better known, at least for me and many other people, is an extremely famous songwriter, Ishai Ribo. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but like we do of him Seder Avodah between Musaf and Mincha on Yom Kippur, which actually that is actually his own writing, both of the text and the melody, based on the traditional text of Seder Avodah. If we have time, we'll touch a bit on that. But this melody, O Hillel Ha'el, is actually from this Rabbi Hillel Paley. It's a beautiful melody, and it has a bit of like a call and response. But again, I will expect that within the next. Right now, it still has the quality of call and response because it's relatively new. In 5 years, I will assume that everybody will be singing together the whole time. But so let's say I will sing the first 2 lines, and then you will repeat those 2 lines, and then I'll sing the next 2 lines, and likely we'll sing the last 2 lines together. And it's done twice, the last 2 lines. The first 2 lines and the third and fourth line are similar melodically. They're not exactly the same, but they're similar. Ochila la'el achale fanav eshala mimenu lashon ochila la'el achale fanav eshala mimenu mane lashon asher bikal am ashira uzo Biaren anot, be'ad mifanav, asher bikal am, ashira uzo, biaren anot, be'ad mifanav, le'adam, marchel Adonai, mare lashon Adonai, sefatai tiftach, ufi yachid tehilatecha le'adam marchel Adonai, sefatai tiftach, ufi yagid tehilatecha. and again, this is also part of the repetition of Amida. It's a beautiful melody. It's a very sweet melody, and we'll only do it just a couple of times. We'll do it 3 times. It's only part of the repetition on. We'll do it only on Musaf of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I do want to point out one little thing, which is in the Siddur. Not always, but I would say 98% of the time, whenever you see Yud Hey Vav Hey, we'll read it as Adonai. Okay. For a number of reasons, whenever we do packages, we try not to write the name of God as Yud Hey Vav Hey. So whenever you see here Yud Yud, it's just the same as Yud Hey Vav Hey, which would be how it would be written in the Siddur, in the Machzor. Let's move to the next one. So I said before the melody, that's a melody that resembles the melody of this leitmotif of the holidays in general, but in particular for the evening service. But we'll also do it for this Aleinu, which is part of the Malchuyot, which is when we sound the shofar. Aleinu l'shabeach, ay rai 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 rai, ay rai 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 rai, ay rai 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 rai. So again, the melody is simple in that it's already familiar. And whoever will lead the Aleinu will sing the parts in between. I do want to point out the Aleinu, we sing Aleinu at the end of every service, correct? Not at the end of Shacharit, but the evening services and Musaf, or Shacharit actually, when it's the weekday Shacharit, ends with Aleinu. Aleinu, Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, if you know, but Aleinu I think was written for Malchuyot, and eventually was taken into the other sections of the service. So it was actually something that somehow was borrowed from the Hagim into the year. Again, this is part of the sounding of the shofar. There are 3 sections when we sound the shofar in Musaf, and each one of these sections ends with Areshet Sefateinu, and we'll sing it, which is in the bottom of the page, and we'll sing it. This year we'll sing it. We've been switching melodies. This year we'll sing it to this melody that many of you might know, which is an Eladon that we sing many times on Shabbat. Eladon areshet sefateinu yerav lef So if you know that melody, we will do that in total of 6 times between both days of Rosh Hashanah at the end of each one of these sounding of the shofar. Let's move on because we don't have that much time. Page 13. Again, there are 24 pages in this packet, so I'm sorry that we'll definitely not cover the whole thing. Hayom is towards the end of Musaf. We used to sing Hayom. If you remember that melody, there was a combination of 3 melodies, which one of the melodies was Hayom, Hayom. So now we're doing this other melody for the beginning of Hayom, and the last 2 lines will go back to this old melody that we used to sing. A little bit, yes, that's right. We like change, but we not as much change. But again, we've been doing this melody for a few years, so by now people might know it, and it's a pretty rhythmic song. Hayom, 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 Hayom te'amtzenu, Hayom te'amtzenu, Amen. Hayom, Hayom tevarchenu, Hayom tevarchenu, Amen. eventually, for the last two lines, we'll go to Ayom, this is the old melody. I'm going to skip the next three songs because we're actually not going to be using those melodies for the holidays. They are part of these weeks of Slichot, and Shacharit is part of Psalm 27, which we recite every day. So that's why we have it there, but I'm going to skip that. I'm going to go to page 14. I'll skip the Kol Nidre. Again, the only thing I will say in the Kol Nidre, there are some sections where people, the community will sing, like when we sing Shvikin, Shvikin, Shevitin, Veterin, Umevutarin, Shvikin, or when we sing Yom Kippur. Actually, no. That's pretty much the only section where the people the community will join. Again, we used to have a choir, for those of you who remember BJ a long time ago. The choir sang many of the sections, different parts, so many people who were in the choir are still singing those sections, and I hear those. When we started by singing Achut Ketana, and I mentioned that there's a piyut that we sing at the beginning of the evening service on Kol Nidre, so which is the one at the bottom of page 14, Lecha Eli Teshuvati. Again, we started doing it many years ago. We used to sing it to Lecha Eli Teshuvati, but a few years ago we switched to a different melody that actually moves the text a bit faster, and in moving the text faster makes it a tiny bit harder to follow for those of you who might have trouble reading all the words at a fast pace, but it's definitely a beautiful melody too, and it goes like this. Lecha Eli Teshuvati, Lecha Cheshki ve'ahavati, Lecha libi vechilyotai, Lecha ruchi ve'nishmati, Lecha yadai, Lecha raglai, u'mimachi techonati, Lecha atzmi, Lecha dami, ve'ori im geviati. So again, those two sections have the same melody, and then eventually goes into a slightly variation, actually to a different melody for the next four lines. Lecha einai v'rayonai, v'tzurati v'tavniti, Lecha ruchi, Lecha chochi, u'mivtachi v'tikvati, Lecha malchut, Lecha geut, Lecha ta'ot tehilati, Lecha ezra be'etzara, Ehyeh ezri be'tzarati. And also a very sweet melody. And again, the only tricky part is always the second line of all these sections is a bit faster. Let's move to Yale on page 15. Another one where we actually have an old melody and a new melody. we'll sing this for a couple of verses and then eventually move to this melody that Dan wrote, which goes, let's say, for the third verse. Ya'aleinu yeinu me'erev ve'yavo selichatenu miboker ve'yerahe nakatenu ad arev ve'yerahe nakatenu ad arev. So we'll sing a few verses with the old melody and a few verses with the new melody, and we'll end eventually with the old melody. Anyway, let's move on. Another piyut. Kine kachomer, and this is a melody that we might probably we'll likely use it at different points, maybe as a nigun, but in reality it belongs only to the evening of Kol Nidre, this piyut, and the melody is also a Chabad melody. Kine kachomer biyad hayotzer ברצותו מרחיב וברצותו מקצר כן אנחנו בידך חסד נוצר לברית הבט ואל תפן ליצר. And eventually for the third verse, it's a similar melody, but it's a bit higher. And the melody goes, hi, rai, 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 hi, rai, 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 hi, rai, 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 hi, rai, 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 labrit habet, labrit habet, ve'al tefen layetzer. Again, a very beautiful, sweet melody, very repetitive, and again, we won't do it as many times, but it's repetitive enough that you should be able to catch on to part of it. Page 17, we have the 13 attributes will be done. The last part of that paragraph. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Bechanun Erech. That will be done. Adonai, Rachum Bechanun Erech Apayim Verav Chesed Vehemet Notzer Chesed LaAlafim. We'll sing it both in the Torah service, and we'll also sing it several times on Yom Kippur. And when it's not in the Torah service, it's actually preceded by this first paragraph. El Melech Yoshev al Kisei Rachamim Mitnaheg B'Chasidut. It's a very repetitive melody. So if you want to do harmonies, you can, and eventually we'll eventually finish with Adonai Adonai. Let's go into Shema Koleinu. Again, another one with this bit of a color response. The first one will be done by the Shliach Tzibur, and then the second time will be done by the community. Many people will sing it both times, but Shema Koleinu, and eventually which is a melody that I grew up with. It's a relatively traditional melody. I don't know how old it is. And eventually we'll move into this melody that was written by Basia, for those of you who remember Basia, when we sing. Al tashlichenu לפניך, היי, ברוח קודשך, אל תיקח ממנו, היי, אל תשליכנו. And it will be also pretty repetitive, and we'll do Shema Kolenu several times during Yom Kippur. On page 18 you have Ki Anu Amecha, which I said before, we'll do it to both Ki Anu Amecha ve'ata Eloheinu anu banecha ve'ata avinu. And we also sing it to the Chabad melody. Ki anu amecha ve'ata Eloheinu. So again, we'll sing several times Ki Anu Amecha throughout Yom Kippur, and we'll probably be switching between between those two melodies. In the bottom of the page you have Ashamnu, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, which many of you probably know. The same thing with Al Kulam on top of page 19. The Kohanim, we will not sing it as what you have there as the second paragraph. Will be part of what I said before, the Seder Avodah. And then the last paragraph is something but both Deborah and I will sing to end Neila, Ptach Lanu Shar, in the section of Slichot at the end of, and that's definitely something that is not sung by the community, but it's a much more lyrical piece written by a friend of mine. Again, it's contemporary, but I recorded with him that probably 40-something years ago, so dates back to the 70s or 80s. That Ptach Lanu Shar is Ramon Tassat. He's an Argentinian Hazan who lives in the DC area. Then you have a bunch of piyutim, page 20 and page 21. Adon aselichot boche levavot gole amukot dover tzedakot katanu lefanecha rachem alenu katanu. Okay, we'll sing it so many times. If you don't know it, you will definitely sing it. And the same is true for Adir V'Naor. Miel kamocha Adir V'Naor Bo Boredok v'cheled Miel kamocha Gole Amukot. Again, so repetitive and it's an acrostic, so by mem you should have it, if you don't know it. So, El Nor Alila will be towards the end of Neila, so near when I'm going to sing Ptach Lanu Shar, we'll also sing El Nor Alila, El Nor Alila, Hamselanu Mechila, Bisheat HaNeila. Very repetitive, only done once at the end of Neila. And then on page 23 and 24, you actually have what I mentioned before that Ishai Ribor wrote, Seder Avodah. If you've never been for Seder Avodah, we started doing it maybe like 5, 6 years ago as an independent section. We traditionally Seder Avodah is actually part of the Musaf service. We moved it away from the Musaf service and it became kind of like something that is done on its own. It will be, I think, at 3:45 here on the afternoon of Yom Kippur between Musaf and Mincha. So we'll come all together here. We don't expect that many people, but it's just a beautiful piece, and the liturgy is an extremely powerful and dramatic section of the liturgy. For the most part, will actually be sung by Deborah and myself. But if you look at the third paragraph, the one that actually has the transliterations. That part will actually be sung by everybody. כהנים והעם העומדים בהזרה שהיו שומעים את שם השם המפורש יוצא מפי כהן גדול היו קוראים משתחווים ונופלים על פניהם ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד איי 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 will sing. Again, if you have never been, I'll encourage you to come. This whole section will be maybe 20 minutes long, and then eventually those of us who are in the church will move to the church. Those of us who will be here will stay here. Okay? Yes. Yeah. No, this one. Ishai Ribo. Yeah, most of them, some of the melodies I mentioned who the author is, or if it was Chabad, or if it was Karlebach, most of the melodies, I don't even know where they're coming from. Like when we sing on Netane Tokev, I literally, when I came here, I decided that I'm going to transcribe the whole Netane Tokev the way that I grew up with. And I said, why will I transcribe it? I will go to JTS, to the library, and find it there, and just copy it. And there were so many on Netane Tokev, none of them are the one that we sing. So I don't even know where that came from. How we made it to Argentina, I don't know. So, but I'm curious too about those melodies. But it may be, it could be that I suspect that some of these melodies in Argentina, similar to here, the community was a mix of like people from all these different backgrounds. So it could be that someone else brought that melody, or that it is actually a melody that is a combination of melodies. When we sing Rosh Hashanah Ikatevun, that is part of many people sing it like that in other places, but the other parts do not. So Basias, no, Basias, yeah. That's why when people say Misinai, many people are saying it's old enough that I have no clue where that melody came from. So we say it's Misinai. Yeah, but thank you. So again, this is an intention on this opportunity to get together and sing many of these melodies. As I said before, there's so many melodies. I only touch on many of the melodies, but there's so many that I did not touch that it's just a bit of like a kind of like sometimes when you go to an opera and you hear the musicians playing like a little thing that will happen later, like how you call it, like a potpourri of different things that will eventually happen during the holiday. So that becomes this opportunity, the same thing as slichot. If you come, it's another way to prepare, the same way that we'll prepare food. And I encourage you to if you have to cook, prepare the food, but prepare spiritually also through listening to the recordings, listening to previous services. This is actually being recorded, so if you want to listen to it online, you can as well. But I hope that you'll be able to enjoy tonight, but also that this will help you, guide you through these holidays. And again, there's so much stuff, both liturgy, there's so many words that will be said. There's so many melodies that will be sung. So don't expect that you can participate on every single thing. Those of us who've been here coming to services for many years know the pain that actually caused us to the process of learning, and also because we don't do it every Shabbat. It's not like every Shabbat. So we do it only once a year, this liturgy. So be patient with yourself. Takes time to get immersed in many of these melodies, but hopefully, if it's new to you, be patient, and hopefully, as you move on throughout the liturgy, you will get more and more of it. Or some melodies might actually repeat. Yeah, so that's beautiful. So Shana Tova to everybody, and again, I'll definitely encourage you, if you're able to come to the Minyanim. Tomorrow is in person, so if you want to hear the shofar, we'll do slichot. We might sing some of the things here that we just did as part of slichot, and then eventually move into the service of Shacharit, and eventually end with the sounding of the shofar. So that will be true for the next few weeks. We'll have slichot, and so if you want to use as a preparation all that through Yom Kippur, or even through Hoshana Rabbah or Simchat Torah, and I'd encourage you to do that. So it's great to see you all. Shana Tova again. It's great to see you all. I hope that everybody in the Zoom. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, and I hope to see you on Shavuot. If you want to take a copy, you can. It's all yours.